Welcome into the Backroads Bill Podcast. I'm Ben, and this week we are going to be diving into a topic that we don't normally discuss on the Backroads Bill Podcast, which is politics. Usually me and Bill kind of stray a little bit away from the political discussions, but this one is Northern Ontario themed because on the show this week we have two mayors from Northern Ontario places. The first one is a place that we've talked to a couple of times on this show. It is probably best known for being the geographical center of Ontario. In fact, we've had this person on the show before. And the other place is our neighbors to the north in the great city of Timmins. And what they both have in common is the mayors from these places are both women. And so we're going to be talking about women in politics with both of these mayors as, again, it's just a conversation of not just how women in politics, how it happens in Northern Ontario, but also at large. We're going to be talking about some of the challenges that they faced, where the needle is moving in the right direction, and just get a kind of look at what does the landscape look like now for women who want to break into politics and who are there already. So it's a really, really cool conversation. They have both been fantastic in their respective offices, and it's a really interesting next 50 minutes or so of conversation that we had with these two ladies. So let's get into it. But first, a word from today's lead sponsor, Source for Sports. It's almost that time of year. Early mornings at the rink, fresh notebooks and backpacks, and a community gearing up for another great season of varsity sports. At Source for Sports North Bay, we're proud to be part of it all. Whether it's finding your kid's first pair of skates, gearing up for tryouts, or outfitting your team for the season ahead, we've got you covered. Because here, we're not just a sports store, we're neighbors, coaches, teammates, and fans. And we're proud to cheer you on every shift, step, and stride of the way. Visit Source for Sports North Bay at 1321 Fisher Street, and let us help you along your way. So this week on the podcast, we are talking something we don't talk about a lot, which is politics on this show. But we do have a really cool highlight for this episode, which is going to be mostly about women in politics. As we brought in two female mayors from Northern Ontario, we have a friend of the show, Cheryl Fort, who is the mayor of Hornepayne, who's been on before, where we talked about the great place that Hornepayne is, and we also brought in, and I'm not going to butcher this last name, Michelle Boileau, from the mayor of Timmins. Did I say that right, Michelle?
You said it very well, thanks.
There we go. See, my French is getting better and better.
And you welcome to the show again.
Oh, yes, and welcome to the show.
He's so proud of himself.
Yes, so
it's been a long day.
Yeah, no, the Backroads Bill Podcast is not just about the back road. It's about the people on the back roads, and this is a good example. So we have kind of a rural mayor and one of the 5 major cities in Northern Ontario, but it's about it's about women in politics, and they founded the Northern Ontario Women's Association. We're going to talk a bit about that and their struggles and their journey and their challenges. Cheryl is the second Indigenous mayor in Ontario. I think we proved that in another show. And Michelle, I don't think Timmins had a previous a mayor as a woman, if I can remember.
Did Mayor Jamie Lim.
Oh, Jamie Lynn, that's correct.
Early 2000s, but it had been long enough in Timmins for people to forget. 20 years apparently is long enough.
Yeah, she went on to the OFIA, and if I remember. But I'm going to give a little context here for everyone, all the listeners and viewers and all the platforms, is that, federally, in 1980, there were 16 MPs in 1980. In 2020, that was 40 years, 100. And in 2025, there's 104 out of 343, about 30%. Now, provincially, in 1980, there were 8. In the year 2000, there was 21. In 2025, there's 46, which represents about 30% of the 124 MPPs. Now, municipally, of the 100 largest cities in Canada, 21 are female candidates. Now, I only say that because we'll use Kathleen Wynne as an example. Started out as a school board trustee in the TDSB, Toronto District School Board, rose in the ranks, became the premier, et cetera. And all the way along, I mean, it's like one leap, one step, another step, another step. But For women, it's and we just had someone on our last podcast. We had a program in Sault Ste. Marie at White Pines Collegiate and Vocational School where they have a women in trades program as early as grade 7, 8, and 9 to expose them. And so these are good things. And we want to talk about the good things today, but we also want to talk about those challenges. But so let's start with Cheryl. Give us a little bit about your bio about how you eventually got to be mayor of Hornepayne, the geographic center of Ontario.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me. It's so nice to be here with Michelle. I'm excited to be here and talking about the Northern Ontario Women's Association later. But yeah, so I'm the mayor of Hornepayne, got elected in 2018. And my journey started actually as a school board trustee back when I was in my early 20s. And have always been into community development, trying to ensure that all the communities that I've ever lived in are that they have activities, that people can prosper and that people can love where they live. And that's what I've been doing in Hornepayne since being mayor. So from some of the background work that it takes for a woman to be qualified for this position, not only do you need schooling and the right context, but your list of areas that you have competency in need to be long as well. So I've been on the hospital board. I was the library board member and then the chair of that. I also now been in Ontario Good Roads and the Algoma District Services Administration Board, and then brought Hornepayne out to different areas as well with the Northeast Association, Municipal Association, NEOMA, and the Northeast Superiors Mayor Group. So there's a lot of connections that you have to make as a small town mayor, which we were in the discussions in the intro. People might not have heard this, but we were talking about how there's full-time mayors and I would be a part-time mayor, but that does not mean the work is part-time.
The work is definitely not part-time.
No, not at all. But it is good work. It needs to be done, and I'm happy to see that with the women in Northern Ontario that we've been able to make great strides forward for women to come, because we do, like you had said, the women in the trades. We need more women in trades. We need more women in all sectors. Actually, we know by the data that safety goes up, honesty, integrity, all of these things go up, and makes a better work environment for everyone when women are involved.
Well, you well know that, just as a bit of an aside, that Cheryl is also a locomotive railway engineer, and that you broke some ground there as well, and that's a whole other story. But nonetheless, it's similar in what we're talking about today. But Michelle, tell us a little bit about your background in Timmins.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to start off like Cheryl, and thank you for having me on the show. I'm a big fan. And also thank you for facilitating this meeting between me and Cheryl, because though we are good friends and would love to get to chat more often, we're both very busy and hardly ever get the chance to do that unless it's scheduled. So thank you for bringing us together for this chat. So yes, I'm the mayor of the city of Timmins. As you mentioned, one of the 5 large cities in Northern Ontario, something I'm very proud of to be serving in this capacity. I was elected to council in 2018 as a councillor, and then decided towards the end of that term that I wanted this to be my full-time gig. I was enjoying especially the board and committee work that you get to do when you're in this role, and thought I'd throw my name in for the mayor's role. And while I was a counselor, I was actually working for community college, working in social services, employability, post-secondary education. And so my work not only made it so that there's a lot of community involvement, a lot of work with community partners, but I was also always responsible for more regional positions. And so work always brought me across Northern Ontario. I've thought of you often, actually, Bill, because, I've listened to your show as I was driving the back roads of Northern Ontario, going to visit the different high schools and things. And actually, had the pleasure of being able to expose girls to trades programs and in that role. And I think that had a lot to do with, it was a contributing factor to why I decided to run first for council, getting to really see what life in Northern Ontario is, having gone away for studies and worked a little bit, and then coming back home. Not only did I come back home, but I got to travel across Northern Ontario and really get to know the North. Made it so that I got to appreciate the commonalities and the similarities and what it is that makes us so unique here, but also came to appreciate a lot of the challenges and, inequities that we're facing here in Northern Ontario. And I think that really drove me to want to get more involved and more engaged. And the rest is history, really.
Yeah, we want to talk about those inequities. And, Barbara Hanley was the first woman mayor in Canada, in Webwood, in northeastern Ontario here, from 1936 to 1944. And then we, a couple of stalwarts, Hazel McCallum, 36 years the mayor of Mississauga, and Charlotte Whitten, many times elected in Ottawa. And they were... the media, I think, has to blame for everything. And, they always have to say, a woman mayor. We don't need to have that noun adjective to describe the mayor, right? We don't need to do that. But I was thinking for both of you, and we'll start with Cheryl, like the mentors that you had in your life, whether it's family, partners, whether they're male or female, that really gave you the confidence to enter politics and also meet the challenges of being a woman, even in this day and age.
Well, thank you for that. You gave me I have to say, Bill, I'm going to have to rib one of my male colleagues at some point and say, this is the male mayor of such and such. I just love that you made that distinction, but I am going to use that in the future. We'll poke a lot of fun. But the one thing that I do want to say is that, so being Indigenous in Canada, my mother, so my grandfather was a residential school survivor. So my mother didn't attend traditional school at all. My grandfather assimilated. They couldn't take the children, my mom and her 9 siblings. So what this created was my mother is resilient. She grew up completely in the bush on a lake called the Goki Lake up north, can hunt, fish, shoots a gun, does all sorts of non-traditional roles because you had to survive. And so first and foremost, I grew up with the mom that didn't see boundaries. Didn't understand the education system. Like I would come home and she'd be like, well, why can't you do that? Like, why aren't you going into shop class? Like, why is that not acceptable? So, and when you look at it, like taught herself to read at an early age in her 20s, is fluent in English but was raised with Anishinaabe Moam as their primary language. So I really looked at that as that, as a person, we have so many strengths within us if we want to utilize them, if we believe in ourselves that we want to utilize them. So although there was struggles, like that brought in struggles, of course, having a parent that has never gone to traditional schooling and not understanding that, I was out on my own a lot. And because my dad could relate as a male father figure, but of course, girls and women have a lot of different challenges that dads would not know. So from that perspective, I really have to highlight my mom first and foremost, and then from there, it really came down to the elderly women in our community. Often I will speak with different people. Since I've been mayor, people have passed away, but their voices in the background really speak to me when I have to go to government, talking with people like Michelle, and we want to set things up because you need a fire in your belly to do some of this work. It doesn't, you have to know your why and you have to stand up. There's so many challenges that women face when they're trying to make change and break down these barriers.
Yeah. Okay, Michelle, tell us about some people that made a difference in your life, because we got to get back to the barriers.
Yes, yeah. No, I think similarly my parents, because, they were just always, not that they were necessarily encouraging and, trying to put me in all the best clubs and the top things or anything, but it never made me feel like anything was impossible. And so, I'll never forget, and I probably wasn't even 10 yet, being in the vehicle, listening to the radio with my dad. And I don't know how we got on the topic, but I recall telling him that I was going to be the first female Prime Minister of Canada one day. And he burst in my bubble and said, sorry to tell you, hon, but Kim Campbell's already done that for about half a year. And, and I thought, okay, well, this is where representation really matters. Because I was like, oh, okay, it's not that crazy of a thought then if someone's already done it. and then he followed up with, but you can be the first female president of the United States, the United States of America, if you'd like. And kind of just found a way to say, okay, well, someone's already done that, but yes, you can go and try to do what's the seemingly impossible, right? And he kind of kept encouraging in that sense. And so I thought that was really neat. And, I didn't understand all the logistics that would go into becoming the first female president at the time. So do now, not going to pursue that. But that being said, it was just a very humbling moment to realize, oh, there's already been a woman prime minister, and then to hear, but go ahead and keep trying for something even bigger and crazier. So that was, that was impactful without even realizing it in the moment. And then, as I mentioned, representation matters. I can't think of one female figure that really, served as a mentor. But the fact that Jamie Lim was mayor when I was young and just starting to really pay attention to politics, especially at the local level, our mayor at the time was a woman. So again, it didn't seem like it was anything out of the norm. And so I think I hold that very dearly where, because I understand how important it was for me to see women in these roles and to make it just seem so normal and seem like there's a place for me. I understand how important it is for me to be in this role and to be able to serve that same purpose for a lot of young girls today.
Yeah, and for me, I think I mentioned this to Cheryl when I was up to Hornepayne the last time. I think I did. We were traveling out to the center of Ontario, but and it's not. In my lifetime, all the best bosses I've ever had were women, because if we can agree that men and women are wired differently, and that's an easy thing to say, but I don't know. But I always thought anytime I worked for a man, it was always like about them, whereas the other way around, it was, okay, Bill, this is what you can or cannot do. And that's, in other words, they set my boundaries for me, and they were very forthright in doing so. And I don't know how this is going to factor into some of these barriers we're going to talk about, but let's talk about maybe, first of all, how this Northern Ontario Women's Association evolved and what's that all about?
Well, it started with a conversation between Cheryl and I at one of the municipal conferences, and we already knew each other from the previous term. You had served as mayor, I was a councillor, and after being elected mayor, I had shared this with my CAO at the time, and I mentioned that I found it unfortunate that not more women had been elected to council with me, because I had it in my mind that if I were to be elected mayor, I would love to start a sort of women's caucus, for the City of Timmins Council. And then post-election, there was just myself and one other councillor, Councillor Murray. And so I shared with my CAO, oh, it's unfortunate. I really had this, hopes for a women's caucus. And he mentioned, well, why limit yourself to just council? There are a lot of strong woman leaders in this community, the head of our hospital, the head of the Chamber of Commerce, the head of the Economic Development Corporation. There are a lot of women at the helm of these organizations that perhaps you'd consider getting together with them to have a bit of a women's caucus. And so I was sharing this with Cheryl. I was like, I don't know if I'll end up doing that, brought it out to the community or not. And that's when Cheryl was like, well, why limit yourself to just Timmins? Why don't we gather female elected officials in Northern Ontario? And it started from that. And so, coming from my perspective, it was really the need for that peer support network once elected. There were a lot of organizations that already existed to help encourage women to consider running for either politics or positions of leadership, but couldn't find anything that once you were there that could provide that support and the resources. So that was kind of the perspective I was coming with. And Cheryl, I'll let you speak to the perspective you were coming from, but you brought a whole different perspective to it that I've really appreciated about trying to better the experience of women and girls in communities such as yours. So I'm going to let you speak to that part.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we had this great conversation, and at the same token, I'm in the background thinking, like, how do we help women? I had been at this time about 6 or 7 years in council, and when I first got on council I was the only woman on council of an all-male council with a male mayor and a male deputy mayor. And there was a lot of challenges. So, and what I had saw through this whole process was there was a lot of disparity in Northern Ontario when it came to women. One example I use quite frequently is children. So when women get pregnant in Northern Ontario, this is a both male and female problem challenge, because we come together as a family and we need to have a baby in a safe environment. And what does that entail? So let's use Hornepayne. Hornepayne, I have to travel either to Hearst. Doesn't necessarily mean I'll be able to have my baby there. You have to have all the doctors in place. Your anesthesiologist has to be there at that time as well. For my third child, I had to travel to Thunder Bay because the anesthesiologist was on holidays during the due date, during the 2-week period around my due date. So now that puts in complications because you have your other 2 children at the time. I had 2 older children and my husband was working full time. So this puts a lot of strain on the families that you don't necessarily see to the extent in Southern Ontario where you have much more available services. So that was one, and that's where we came in and joined together, was not only do we need more women running, because we have many, many laws and bylaws that need to be changed with a woman focus and participation. Because we do make up 50% to 51% of the population. And then further that, how do we figure out to equalize the disparities we're seeing across the province? We live in Canada and Ontario. We have a great country. How do we ensure that no matter where you live, you can have safe, reliable services? And that's what we're seeing. And we've talked on all, that's just one example is healthcare. We can go into education, many different examples throughout. Was that exactly, did I hit it right, Michelle?
That's it. Yes.
We often talk about the rhythm of life in North Bay. For Amanda, that rhythm was fast. Hockey practices, baseball games, juggling a full-time career, and keeping up with 2 energetic boys. But life hit pause after routine surgery led to a call she never expected. Stage 2 breast cancer. No symptoms, no warning. Suddenly, Amanda was facing a double mastectomy, reconstruction, weeks of chemotherapy and radiation treatments, and several additional surgeries. The path ahead was overwhelming. Through every stage, one question stayed with her: how do I keep being mom for my boys? Amanda's care team at the North Bay Regional Health Centre made all the difference. They understood how deeply she wanted to hold on to familiar routines, cheering from the stands, being there at bedtime, staying present in the moments that gave her strength. Their compassion kept her connected to the 2 people who kept her fighting. She stayed present, she stayed grounded, she stayed mom. This holiday season, help ensure patients have access to the exceptional care they need during life's most challenging moments. Your gift helps patients like Amanda stay connected to the people they love while strengthening healthcare for families across our region. Visit nbrhcfoundation.ca or call 705-495-8125 to give.
So what are you doing now in the association, and how often do you meet, and what are the plans for the Northern Ontario Women's Association?
Well, it's pretty exciting. I'll speak to this. So I'm the president and Michelle is one of the vice presidents. So we've gone as far already to have several meetings. We've organized, we've created the executive, we've created our terms of reference. We're currently right now, which is really exciting, in the process of incorporation. We're hoping to have that all settled up by our meeting in January. And and we've been meeting quarterly at least for the last 2 years. And then the executive meets monthly or bi-monthly, depending on the need. And we have, I'll let Michelle speak to some of the things we've already championed. How's that?
Yeah, no, thanks. What's great is that though we're very much in this kind of building phase where we're building up the organization and mobilizing, it was evident that there was a demand already for some sort of offering, just in terms of the membership was eager to get something from this. And so though we're still just organizing and incorporating and, setting the foundation for the future, we've started to host virtual fireside chats. And so just, the opportunity for outside of one of the membership meetings, women to come together to talk about experiences, exchange best practices. And ultimately what we're hoping to do is to be able to host an annual conference where we can really gather everyone from across Northern Ontario, provide resources, provide networking opportunities, because that's the idea, again, is to be able to build that network, because we all know in Northern Ontario, it's easy to feel isolated and, sometimes due to geography alone. But just by having those contacts, I'm in Northeastern Ontario and, having contacts in Northwestern Ontario who are living some of the same things as us and have some, some practices and best practices to share. I think what was most telling about this group, bringing this group together, was how needed it was. Our first Zoom meeting, and at this point, it was just an idea. And we put a call out to we started with mayors, women mayors in Northern Ontario, an invitation to meet on a Zoom call. Cheryl and I have this idea. We want to see what they think. And it was scheduled for an hour. We were on there for well over 2 hours. And I'm not lying, the whole time, smiling faces across the screen. We had over 40 women just smiling nonstop. And so, it became obvious that this was something that was needed. People felt that they needed it, felt relieved to have it. And so we're just building off that. We're going to make it whatever it needs to be.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that too, is that connectivity and network, like the women have been able to make connections with right across Northern Ontario where they might not have made those connections before. So we've been able to facilitate that. And we've already also gone to the government for delegations to push some concerning issues forward. So it's in the beginning phases, but it's already moving forward.
Yeah. And just before you cut in here, Bill, I just sorry, I know you're trying to get in. This what happens.
See, now we're having a conversation.
For a chat, sorry. And now I'm losing my thought. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
The train
Bill.
left the station.
Yeah, there, I did it again. No, you'll come back to that good thought because when I first heard about this and I thought, and now that it's well explained, I mean, this is going to be a huge opportunity to advocate for the changes. You said laws, bylaws, etc. So my question for both of you is this one, entertainment, sports, the world of business, etc. I mean, I don't want to simplify politics as power and control, but is politics and there has been growth in representation, but is politics one of those last, I don't want to say it the last bastion of places, but is politics more difficult to overcome the challenges than, say, in other fields like entertainment and sports? That's my question.
It's a good question. I think like in most things, politics is often about who you know. And so I think that's why what the NOW Association is trying, the Northern Ontario Women's Association is trying to do is to, like we said, broaden the network to make it so that you have the opportunity to know the right people. And that was part of the discussion as well. Often you hear about the Old Boys Club. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was first elected mayor being asked, is it still a thing? Or, just the assumption that the Old Boys Club doesn't exist anymore. And I'm there to, announce that, in fact, it's alive and well. But it was that idea that, well, if there's the Old Boys Club, why don't we create the Old Girls Club here? When you're at a municipal conference and all the men seem to know each other already, and because they've had their social things and, and the handshakes, and you're there with your colleagues, wouldn't it be great if all of a sudden you could introduce your male colleagues to a woman mayor or something, right? And you already know each other because you're part of the Old Girls Club. Like, let's try to establish that where, we have a network that they're not a part of. And it's not that we don't want them to be a part of, but there are certain things that we could talk about in that space that we can't talk about in other spaces. And that's why it needs to exist.
I can't speak to sports and entertainment, but I can speak to the corporate world and the railwaying trades. There's definitely still challenges there. We don't see the representation that we'd like to see. Just in my position, I work all with male colleagues. Again, through my entire career, I was probably less than, I'm going to say 10% of women in the different places that I've worked. So definitely in there needs to be some change. And the same data that I had shared earlier, the safety skyrockets when women start getting involved because I think it's a complementary. We need the complementary ways of thinking from male and female. Males are one thing that I really am jealous of is they make a decision, they stick to the decision, it's one-minded, way we go. And sometimes when I'm struggling to make a decision, I'm thinking about 50 million things that could come into play, and I can't focus in on that decision. So I think we complement each other. But in the same token, when women are in those areas, especially when it's concerning with safety, creating safe spaces, women are the ones that really champion that, because primarily we're the ones that can feel unsafe. So I do think we complement that, and there needs to be work done, I think, across all sectors still. But of course, in politics, and how Michelle alluded to the old boys club, for sure, it's those long-standing connections, right? And we will have those in 50 years, in 20 years. It will be a different conversation.
And finally, I would just add that until pregnancy and parental leave policies are updated, I think that it will remain challenging.
I was going to ask about that.
Well, Ben, go ahead and ask about that.
Well, because we were talking, one of our colleagues is actually just had her second kid, and she's off on mat leave. And it's interesting when you look at the concept of mat leave, because from the human standpoint, it's awesome. Like, you need that time away. It's an extremely important thing. If you strip away and look at it just from a business standpoint, and you look at it like you take the human element out of it, it's really inconvenient, because now you have to find somebody to fill that spot, and there's a lot of things you have to think about. But obviously, being human, you have to, like, it's an extremely important thing to have, and it's a challenge that's obviously unique to women in especially the corporate world, like you were talking about, Cheryl, and these different places where it is kind of a ruthless. There's just ruthless industries. And so what happens to a mayor that gets pregnant? Because I was just thinking about, like, when you're in an elected position, I don't know if there's ever been rules, like, has that been considered before? Because, women in politics is generally new in the last couple of decades, and when a lot of these policies were written, it probably wasn't something that was thought of. Yeah,
I'm not answering that question, but see, I'm all about the words. They shouldn't call it mat leave. Leave is a negative word.
Yeah,
we never talk about the return as much as on like, why do we do that? But anyway, let's hear the answers to that provocative question.
So, being a mayor that got pregnant while being the mayor, I could tell you that we don't send them off on icebergs. Being the mayor. So it's funny you should ask, because, like you said, this is somewhat of a new phenomenon, having women in politics. And it's reflected in the legislation here in the province of Ontario. So a parental leave policy, or pregnancy parental leave policy, was only adopted by the province in, I believe it was 2017 or 2017. And I only know because our municipality followed suit in 2018 by passing a similar policy. And so up until about 2017, there was no policy built into the Municipal Act. Now there is. And essentially what it says is that you can miss so typically, if you miss 3 months worth of consecutive meetings, then your seat can be vacated. So this now allows you to miss up to 5 months worth of consecutive meetings, and so you're allowed up to 20 weeks of not attending meetings before council can decide to vacate your seat by resolution. And so it's still not the strongest in terms of policy. But that being said, it's not so much, I said update policy. It's not so much that. It's because, quite frankly, I could get the full year if I wanted to, but at the end of the day, I was elected for a 4-year term, and so that would be a quarter of my term where I would be away. And though I'm sure people would be happy to provide me that space that I need if I needed it, that's a quarter of the term that you're now missing out on. And it's not so much the early days. It's challenging for not only a woman, but just young parents in general, especially when you think about the Old Boys Club and how a lot of that activity happens after work hours, around bedtime, bath and bedtime. It's hard to be able to connect with your colleagues and with partners outside of the regular work structure when you're raising a young family. It's just very hard. And so you end up having to make choices. And often you're criticized for them. Where is she? She's never there. No.
Which is very unfair for you, right? Like in that kind of, it's like you can't really win, right? Like it's kind of an awkward spot where if you're elected, people is like they think, well, you should be there, but it's not your fault either for wanting time away to take care of a newborn. It's a very difficult position that's, again, very unique to women that are in that spot.
Well, and Cheryl's going to answer on her part, but I spoke with Michelle about this recently. She was accused of showing some emotion at a meeting and was called up on it, and she was cleared of it. And I thought to myself, well, if you were a man, that would have never happened. But maybe that's one of those challenges, as we just talked about, that if you're not there, where is she, kind of thing. But anyway, I'll let you put that to rest with your thought on that. Michelle, go ahead, and then we'll go over to Cheryl.
Yes, thank you. It was quite remarkable how just the language being used was telling. Whereas the fellow counselors were frustrated and passionate about the work they're doing, I had lost all control, lost my temper, had a temper tantrum, was visibly upset, and so just the language to characterize our conduct had an underlying tone of misogyny. Now, I shared that in my response to a complaint that was submitted against me. Now, apparently I've called everyone a misogynist because you can't even point out the fact that some of the language is doing this, right? Without it just, no, that she's calling them a misogynist. And so it's unfortunate because we can't even just have a conversation about what's really happening without it becoming inflamed. And it's important, though, that we have the conversation because it's happening.
Well, my daughter, who is a psychotherapist, basically will say to most clients or people or to her dad, you don't know what you're saying when you say certain things. You get gaslighting, etc. But over to Cheryl, maybe you have an example of this, what we're talking about right now.
Oh, I have plenty of examples to pull from. But most recently, I had something similar in a town hall meeting where a resident came up and basically said my tone was inappropriate. And, and I have no problem. And I said that in the meeting. I have no problem if my tone isn't appropriate for a certain instance, I will apologize. But in this case, I did not apologize. I said, I am the mayor. I do have to have a different tone for different people. Sometimes we're negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts. Sometimes we're running a meeting that's high intensity, and there's multiple things you're thinking about. You're not just thinking about, am I smiling enough? And does my voice sound good? It's just... And the thing is in this, and I did say, had I been a male in the response to this particular question, this would not be discussed. My tone is very infrequently different. It comes off the same, and I'm not changing my whole personality to be mayor. So you got to take who I am. So, and that's one of the challenges, right? Like I said this years ago when I hired on CN Rail, one of my colleagues, I was carrying a flowery lunch bag, and they said something to the effect that, if you're going to work with the men, you can't be bringing all your girly stuff in here. And I looked him straight dead in the eyes. I said, I did not hire on CN to be a man. I hired on CN to be a conductor, and walked right by him. And, so, but that's one of the, to me, I understand that people are at different places in their life. And I hope that by my response, it would encourage them to look at what misogyny is. What is female misogyny? What is misogyny in itself? How does that play out in our language? Because it is used frequently in our language. And I'm not going to apologize for who I am. And when I know that my intent and what I'm coming at with is I'm not there to disparage anybody or anything. But at the same time, if you're asking a very deliberate and disrespectful question to me, I'm not going to step down and take that. I don't think anyone should. I had a really good response to my tone, but that goes to show. And the most unusual thing I'd have to say about this whole incident is if you looked at the plethora of online meetings we have, I am probably the most a menial tone out there every time. And we've had other, and why I am so freely to say this is my counsel has said that to me. They're like, we're far more aggressive at times and what have you, right? But yet it's my tone that's being addressed. So, but yeah, but there are many, Bill, there are many areas that it's a conversation that needs to be had. And until more women are in the environment and standing up for themselves and not, sometimes we take hits, but you have to stand up for yourself and say, no, I'm going to be a woman and I'm going to be a leader, not a woman leader, not a male leader. I'm going to be a leader, and it looks different.
We are lucky enough to live in a time where a lot of barriers have been broken down. It's not perfect, but when you consider like 30, 40, 50, even 20 years ago, we live in a bit of a different time where there are a lot more women. There's even just in North Bay, we see it all the time, like the different cultures that we have now. It's not just a monoculture or dual culture that we had when I was growing up. It's now we see so many people from all around the world, cultures, races, all these things that have made North Bay, I think, a better place. But it's interesting as I think a lot of the old boys clubs, a lot of the older thinking, when they start retiring, they start moving on, there's that cycle that happens. And the way that people are raised now, do you think what do you think the landscape of women in politics is going to look like? We talked about it a little bit, but maybe in 30 or 50 years, do you think that they're going to have their own unique challenges, but do you think that a lot of the things that you guys are going through now or went through as you were growing up, it's going to be a bit of a different world for those women who are now going to be in leadership positions?
It's a good question, Ben. It's hard to say because as we've been saying throughout this whole conversation, women in politics is a fairly new phenomenon. I mean, hearing just the figures from 1980 that you shared, Bill, it's quite remarkable, the progress that's been made just in the past 50 years. However, if things remain the same, I'm not sure how many more women will have participating in this sphere. That being said, I'm not sure how many men will want to participate in the sphere. It could be quite ugly out there with the rise of online hate. And we know that women end up being the targets of that, a lot more and in worse ways than men. And so as long as that continues, and if as a society we don't make like major changes, I'm not sure. I'd like to be optimistic, but even just for this next election that's coming up next year, we look around the room and I wonder who, my colleagues at the Northern Ontario Women's Association and other, at other tables will put their name in again because of the stories that I've heard, the stories that we're exchanging. It's a tough time. But as long as we keep doing the work that we're doing, I'd like to think so. Like I said, a big part of why I do this is because representation matters. And so if we all just kind of decide to retreat, who does that leave us left with as the role models for the next generation of girls? So
yeah, I have a bit of a different take just because I am Indigenous and we didn't even have the right to vote female Indigenous women until 1960. So I've seen the needle move quite a bit, and for me to be a mayor now. So one of the things that I'm seeing with I'm almost going to say a rebirth of Indigenous culture that's been allowed to exist now in Canada. And I say allowed because it was illegal under the Indian Act. And now it's that's been removed and we can celebrate. So we're seeing Indigenous women come back into their roles, traditional roles, which were leaders in society. So I'm hopeful in that regard that as Canada heals and we see the 94 calls to action be implemented throughout Canada, there'll be a resurgent or a rebirth of what existed in the past and a better past. And then what I like to see is with the now, that's why I'm so excited about us being being incorporated at this time so that we can get together and have some really good optimistic conversations for those women that do choose to run, because what Michelle is saying is completely on mark. It is a toxic place, and you have to have eyes wide open to come into this environment. But I am hopeful that over the next year we'll be able to solidify the now so that there is a really strong supportive network for women that will run, and we need them to run. Communities need them to run. So although it can be is visceral a too strong of a word to use as an environment.
So, Cheryl.
But if we equip them with the proper armor, we will survive.
Well, that's a segue. That's a segue back to the Northern Ontario Women's Association. I mean, there's always been national organizations, for the old term of women's rights, so to speak. But now, how are you going to attract women, younger women, to go into any leadership role? I know it's not just politics, but how are you going to do that? Because I think you probably stumble, and I don't know. I didn't do enough research to see if there's other organizations across the land like Northern Ontario Women's Association. This may be unique to our conversation, but the question is about how to attract younger women and make a difference, because that's what you're trying to do and needs to be done as well.
Cheryl mentioned that it's important for women to come into this kind of role or into the municipal sector with eyes wide open. And we often talk about the hard parts and the ugly parts online, but there are a lot of really good parts to it as well. And so making sure that prospective candidates understand that there are two parts to this job, and making sure they're fully aware of the hard parts and what could be the bad parts of it. But then also understanding that, I always say there are good days and bad days in this job. The good days are really good. And that just, it makes it all worth it. And then knowing that there is that support network that'll be waiting for you. And that's where we said, and I think based on the research that we have been doing, I think it is one of the only organizations of the like where it spans across such a large geographic area. There are other similar organizations, but very specific to counties and districts. But like I said, unique in the sense that it's meant to help women after they get there, after they're elected, once they're elected, because it's one thing to encourage more women to participate, but we need them to stay once they're there. And I think that's one of the most important part of the model, because just that first term, you do a lot of learning. And after that first term, you want to make sure that learning doesn't go to waste and that we're able to keep building on it and make the most impact as we can. And so we got to keep people here as well.
We also work with other organizations that do that good work, like Women in Politics or Women in Politics Now. Did I get that right? Politics Now, sorry. And they can, put up their background on that. They can do some training about what your role is going to be as a municipal councillor or a mayor. And then AMO themselves, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, they're running concurrent sessions right now for new politicians. So there's a lot of that background work being done to help people just transition easily into the role if they're interested, right? And then of course we're here if once they're elected to help them along.
Yeah. No, I was going back to your, my takeaway for today is about preparing them with the right armor. That's going to be my takeaway for sure. But as we kind of wind down, I know time's a limitation always. I could talk to both of you all day long. What have we missed? Last words to both of you.
Oh, thanks. That's a tough one. I think I'm going to close off with a French lesson since we started off with one with name.
No.
Well, what we were saying about, for some reason the media feel the need to identify when it's a woman or a female mayor. In French, it's especially the case because, we have the different terminaisons, if it's a male or female. And so people tend to go with mairesse when they're referring to the mayor. So male would be maire and then female mairesse. But traditionally, the mairesse is actually the wife of a mayor.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so, when I insist on being referred to as la maire, people question me on it. And I say, well, there's an article to differentiate the gender here, but, what's the need? It's a position. It's not the person. It's the position, right? So I'm glad that we've been pointing that out because especially in French, it becomes a thing. It's one of those things that irk me. I always appreciate when journalists ask me how I want to be referred to. And then I joke with them that my husband's actually the mairesse.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's been a pleasure to see you, Michelle. And you were so right about we never get together enough unless it's scheduled. But I think I just want to leave people with hope that, no matter what, you're going to have challenges with anything. And Ontario, Canada, municipalities, we're transitioning, and we're seeing the struggles come from other governments doing very different things than they've done in the past. Our allies to the south of us, we see that with the United States of America, right? So you're going to have challenges no matter what. This current challenge, yeah, it happens to be very difficult for women in particular, but it's going to pass. We're going to transition out of it, and there'll be a new, bigger challenge. So that's the way, when I say equip people with the armor, it's really having that right mindset too, right? It's not, yeah, you're going to have your down days, it's going to get you down, but it's not going to keep you down.
Yeah, exactly. I just know you both as outstanding leaders and compassionate individuals, and thank you to you both for being on the Backroads Bill podcast today.
So a big thank you to Michelle and Cheryl for jumping on with us. Again, a really interesting conversation that wasn't as Backroads as normal, but I did say it is Backroads themed. They're both from Northern Ontario communities. But again, it's just two people doing amazing things in Northern Ontario at the political level and doing a lot of great things for women in politics and putting a positive stamp on that as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And we hope they continue to have success in office and keep making Northern Ontario a great place to be. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find more episodes of the Backroads Bill podcast on your favorite podcast platform. We are on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, a bunch of other audio platforms. The video version is available on the North Bay Echo YouTube channel, and you can keep up to date with us on our socials on Instagram, Facebook, under the moniker North Bay Echo. You can also check out everything we have to offer on our website, northbayecho.ca, and sign up for our newsletter, Echo Essentials, which comes in your inbox once a week and does a great job of keeping you up to date with what's going on in the network and in the North Bay area. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this episode. New episodes of this podcast drop every single Wednesday. And that wraps things up for us. We will see you again next Wednesday for another Backroads adventure.